Throughout wrestling history, there are promotions that come and go without much strife. Some build a following, but slowly decline and fail. Then there's the National Wrestling Conference, a promotion that excelled and faded seemingly in the blink of an eye due to a poor creative choice and being scammed by a legend. This is Defunct Championship Wrestling, Episode 6, NWC, the National Wrestling Conference. (1994), the start of wrestling's dark age. WWF's silliest gimmicks, Hogan and pals running WCW, and early ECW looking for its identity. There was a lot of opportunity to be an alternative. That's where promoter T.C. Martin and his partners come in. Martin was a local sports radio host in Las Vegas who paired up with a gentleman named Al Rodriguez and an eccentric Las Vegas businessman, Buffalo Jim Barrier. Buffalo Jim owned an auto repair business near the Strip, but he was also a passionate wrestling fan. Years later, he'd even opened his own wrestling and boxing museum. He was truly larger than life and clearly was born to be in the wrestling business. In October of 1994, they launched the National Wrestling Conference out of the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. Their debut event featured many of the independent mainstays of the time, like Nails, Tito Santana, Bobby Bradley, Terry Funk, and even WCW's Brutus Beefcake. Later that month, they debuted at the Silver Nugget featuring Greg Valentine vs. a Fake Doink, and a main event of Sabu vs. Cactus Jack and a Desert Death Falls Count Anywhere match. It really did go anywhere, including out onto the casino floor as Cactus hit Sabu with a pile driver on a blackjack table. Not that we could see it, the camera missed the spot. Not their fault though, it obviously was an impulse decision and the cameraman didn't know to follow them wherever they went. Still a great visual of them fighting amongst the slot machines though. January of 95, they returned to the Silver Nugget to a house double the size of their October event. Over 1,000 fans packed in to see the main event rematch of Sabu vs. Cactus Jack, this time in a steel cage. The show also featured one of Junkyard Dog's final matches. The next month at the Silver Nugget, another crowd of 1,000 plus packed in to see the Branding Iron match, pitting debuting Virgil versus the returning Terry Funk. Middle-aged and crazy, Funk came out spitting fire and terrorizing everyone at ringside with a flaming branding iron, including T.C. Martin, who was on ring announcer duties. And what does a wrestling genius like Funk do when working with someone who's not known as a great worker? Well, you create as much chaos as possible to fire up the crowd to mask the quality of the match. Funk spends huge chunks at the start brawling through the crowd, threatening the audience, beating up commentators, throwing chairs, causing all sorts of mayhem. The crowd got so hot at one point that they had to tell everyone to stay in their seats over the PA. All this riling up the crowd paid off when Virgil made his comeback. They erupted and Funk sold like a boss as always. Ultimately though, the heel caused enough chaos to eke out a win. The loser of the match was supposed to be branded, but I bet you Virgil big-timed his way into not having to do it. Instead, referee Jesse Hernandez took the double-cross branding. NWC was quickly making their name as the literal Wild West of professional wrestling. In fact, for a time, Meltzer considered them one of the hottest indies in the country. That hot streak would carry into March when they crowned a new NWC champion. Apparently Tito Santana was the champion for their debut event, but he had left for the AWF, so the title was now vacant. Sabu would defeat Funk in another wild contest, this time a chain match to capture the championship. For their events in April and May, they'd bring in some fresh talents like a young Rob Van Dam, and more ex-WWF stars like Jim Duggan, Iron Sheik, Mr. Hughes, and the Honky Tonk Man. NWC certainly was reaching a point where they were becoming more dependent on stars from the past. At the June show, Cactus Jack and the champion Sabu returned for the main event. A four-way steel cage match also featuring Virgil and Mr. Hughes. But the biggest news coming out of the event was the major announcement of a major star debuting the following month. After a nefarious victory by the Honky Tonk Man, he gloated that no one in NWC could beat him. That's when TC Martin made the announcement of an old rival that was answering his challenge on the next show, scheduled for July 22nd, and that rival was none other than the Ultimate Warrior. Warrior hadn't wrestled in 2.5 years, so a familiar, safe opponent like Honky was perfect. The Ultimate Warrior announcement and promotion coincided perfectly with the launch of NWC's TV show Slammin that began airing in July as paid programming. And NWC were shameless in their advertising during Slammin. They used WWF footage, the Ultimate Warrior name, and even Get Ready by 2 Unlimited as the background music for the ads. It was also the theme song for Slammin. The WWF obviously weren't happy, and NWC were forced to promote future appearances and introduce the Warrior as such, without him being Ultimate. July 22nd comes and goes without incident, a sold-out crowd of 1,300 plus the Silver Nugget. Warrior steamrolls and beats Honky Tonk with ease. Even though NWC used just the name Warrior, he was still using elements of WWF intellectual property. The running to the ring, the rope shaking, etc. So after the TV station received a cease and desist, they pulled the episode. Instead, they aired the match via a highlight package later on. With Warrior not booked for the August event, NWC relied on a tag team title tournament won by Rob Van Dam and Bobby Bradley, collectively known as Aerial Assault. The show also featured a fourth Cactus Jack vs. Sabu match to help draw the house. However, they only drew about half the crowd from the last show. At some point around this event, NWC fell into some serious financial difficulty, forcing them to skip running a show in September. That's when an ultimate hero came to the rescue. With NWC's future on the ropes, Warrior stepped in and set up a deal with Martin. He'd forego his booking fee, instead accepting a portion of the ticket sales. Obviously, because it was the Warrior, there were some other demands. 1, they would advertise his Warrior University Wrestling School, and 2, they would change the name to Warrior Promotions. All parties agreed, and they proceeded to promote Warrior's next appearance for October 7th against Jim Neidhart at their first anniversary show. But I don't think Warrior got the message about the cease and desist.
But nobody stands as great and powerful as the Ultimate Warrior, formerly the Ultimate Warrior, the Warrior, call me Mr. Nobody.
They may not have run a show in September, but Slammin' TV would still air throughout the month to hype up the Warrior's return. This included the episode with the now infamous spot where Jim Neidhart used a clan robe to sneak attack Virgil. And this wasn't a one-time gimmick either. One of the local NWC talents, the Thug, who was pushed pretty hard as a top heel, had used a hood in another episode to antagonize his black opponent. And you can see that things are starting to go off the rails. NWC had arranged for Warrior to make several media appearances the days leading into the show as a final push to fill the 5,000-seat Aladdin Theater. He no-showed them all, arriving a day late. After noon of the show, he hid in his hotel room with all the sponsorship money that had been paid for the show. He'd check out and disappear later that evening. Get the full story in the last video. TC Martin and Neidhart would bury Warrior in front of the 1,400 fans that showed up, saying Neidhart had run him out of the National Wrestling Conference. The Warrior's behavior cost NWC a great deal of money and goodwill with the fans. The September 24th episode of Slammin' TV, the Clan Robe episode, from what I could decipher, was the last episode to air. NWC would shut down after the October 7th debacle. But NWC wasn't dead. They'd come back months later with shows in May and June of 1996 at the reliable Silver Nugget. The fan base this time around, though, didn't come out to support the way they had before. Even with former WWF stars like Honky Tonk Man, Virgil, Kama, and Iron Sheik joining younger names like Bobby Bradley, Johnny Payne, and Sabu, attendance didn't reach half of what they'd done before. So in March of 1997, they tried to relaunch yet again, but this time in Sacramento, California. They'd present cards with relatively the same crew as their peak, but also bringing in Jake the Snake Roberts, Dan Severn, and Bam Bam Bigelow. They'd run 3 shows in 97 and 3 more in 1998, finally closing up shop once and for all in August of 1998, with Jake Roberts defeating the Honky Tonk Man in the main event via disqualification. And that was a flat end to a promotion that at one point was really rolling towards being something special. I really think had they not gotten into bed with Warrior, NWC could have been one of the most fondly remembered indies of the 90s. Instead, they're a small footnote. Most remembered not for their matches or characters, but for being a pit stop for an egomaniac and a really tasteless angle. Watching through the run of Slammin' TV, there was some really good stuff. It wasn't great, it definitely wasn't going to change the landscape of the business like ECW did, but it was pretty enjoyable wrestling. Sabu and Cactus are great, Terry Funk is awesome, Virgil is super over, Rob Van Dam and Bobby Bradley were a fun babyface team, and Johnny Payne became one of my favorites. A good old wild wrestler in the mold of Buzz Sawyer. Big fan.
Anybody want to come as Johnny Payne? Bring him on, Virgil! Anybody I know!
And that's the story of the National Wrestling Conference. They could have been so much more, but unfortunately it wasn't in the cards. Huh? Alright, we're done here. I'd like to thank Wrestling Observer, The Wrestling Site, Classic Wrestling Articles, and Pro Wrestling Stories for their articles related to NWC. Big help in researching this project. If you're looking to check out some NWC Slammin', be sure to visit the Roy Lucier Wrestling Territories channel. He's got them all and then some. And as always, leave your suggestions for other defunct promotions I should be looking at down in the comments. I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Thanks for watching.